When it comes to the next generation consoles, I think a very big talking point and a very prevalent talking point is going to be the power factor. I think that for me personally, it's not the be all end all, but that doesn't mean people don't care. I do care to an extent. I think everybody, when we talk about the next generation consoles, cares about the power factor to the extent that they would like to see a significant upgrade, especially if they're going to be paying for it. So when it comes to the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox, Xbox 2 or Scarlett, Anaconda, whatever you want to call it, I think that the power factor isn't going to matter nearly as much as some people maybe think it will, but I still think that Sony and Microsoft are going to care enough to do something maybe different this time around. So what I'm talking about here is I think maybe there's a chance, based off of some information we got from an industry insider who's been correct about a lot of things and has a very good track record. We got a little bit of information that leads me to speculate that maybe there is a chance Sony is going to be taking a page out of Microsoft's book when it comes to how they're going to handle the release of the PlayStation 5. And so what am I talking about? Well, we know that Microsoft, I mean, again, this is all like kind of leaked information, but there's enough information regarding Microsoft's next generation console that we know they are going to be releasing multiple SKUs. This is all but confirmed at this point. I'd be very shocked if that wasn't what ended up happening. They're going to be releasing what they call the Xbox Anaconda. These are code names, by the way. And this is going to be the very powerful next generation Xbox. It's going to be the successor to the Xbox One X. And we know that they're going to be releasing what's called lockhart, which is the interesting factor here because lockhart is going to be a cheaper model of the next generation Xbox. It's going to be much more affordable, but because of that, it's going to be significantly less powerful. And it seems to me that the idea of lockhart as a console is to provide entry into the next generation at a very low price point, at least compared to the very powerful Anaconda. So for a long time, we've been thinking about when it comes to the PlayStation 5, Sony's just going to kind of stick to what it's done and do one single SKU, and it's going to be kind of in the middle, in between maybe Anaconda and Lockhart at a $400 price point. But with that, some people are concerned that maybe Sony's not going to be able to, come out with a PlayStation 5 powerful enough at that price point to justify or to, I guess we could say, excite gamers enough to want to upgrade. Now, I've discussed before why I think the power factor of the PlayStation 5 won't really matter that much. There's a lot of other reasons people will buy the PlayStation 5 that go way beyond how powerful it is or how many teraflops it offers. But I also won't deny that to a lot of gamers, power does matter, right? And if people are going to be spending another $400 or $500, whatever, they want to know they're getting the most bang for their buck. And I totally understand that. So this information I'm talking about comes from known industry insider who is from Kotaku, Jason Schreier. I know a lot of people don't like him. I don't really pay much attention to him. Maybe I should because he's an industry insider. But anyway, apparently he was on the Reset Era forums, which I also do not spend any time there. But it seems that he was talking a little bit about the next generation consoles and pointing out that there's a lot of false information going around, but he said one thing that really made me start to speculate a little bit, where he says that one thing he can say for sure is that both Sony and Microsoft will be striving for a higher power factor than Google. Now, for those who don't know, what that means is Google came out on stage and announced that when you stream a game from their Stadia platform, you're basically going to be playing off I guess we could imagine it being a console or a PC that's the equivalent of, I believe, 10.7 teraflops, which is significantly higher than the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X, obviously. And so it is a lot of power for sure. So when Jason Schreier comes out here and says that he knows for sure that Sony and Microsoft are striving to hit, something that's beyond 10.7. We did see this leak that came out that said the PlayStation 5 is going to be around 11.6 teraflops. Maybe those things could line up. But the real question is this: if this is true, and if you choose to believe this information, which he's a trusted insider, he's been correct about a lot of things before, so I think it's safe to say he probably knows what he's talking about. I don't think he would come out here and say this if he didn't, know it was true. But he could be wrong. We have to keep that in mind. But if he is correct about this, we have to kind of ask ourselves, is it going to be realistic for Sony to release, let's say, an 11 to 12 teraflop console at a reasonable price point? I think most people would consider the sweet spot the $400 point. Well, I don't think so. I really don't think Sony is going to be able to compete with Microsoft in that way, where they're going to, from what we're hearing, apparently the Xbox Anaconda will be about 12 teraflops, give or take, around that. So it's going to be very powerful for sure, and that will definitely surpass, Google Stadia 10.7. So with that in mind, I think a lot of people are expecting the Anaconda version of the next Xbox to be $500 at the very minimum, right? There's a chance maybe it could be a little bit more expensive than that. Unlikely, but I think $500. So would Sony be willing to release a single SKU of the PlayStation 5 for $500? I think they could. I think there's a chance they could, but I think it would be pretty risky on their part. I really do. So what I think is possible, now I don't know if it's likely, but this is where the speculation comes in. I think maybe there's a chance here that Sony could be gearing up to do the same thing that Microsoft is planning on doing, where they maybe offer for the first time, at least it feels like the first time. I don't recall this happening. I mean, they've done it with like the PS3, but this is a little bit different, where they're going to offer multiple SKUs of the PlayStation 5 at launch. They're going to maybe do exactly what Microsoft is doing, where they have a cheaper version of the PlayStation 5 that will definitely be a lot less powerful than the higher end version of the PlayStation 5, but it still will be a next gen machine. It will still have a beefed up CPU, and you will still be able to see major improvements, just like you will with the next generation Xbox consoles, even if you buy the cheaper one. Maybe you just won't be able to hit resolutions nearly as high or something like that, or maybe certain things just won't look as good or run as good. But this could definitely be something that Sony could do. I don't necessarily know if it's likely. This is where it becomes tough because Sony has been so quiet, whereas we know pretty much for sure that Microsoft is doing this. They will be releasing multiple consoles. Phil Spencer even said on stage when he mentioned the consoles that they're deep in development of consoles, as in multiple consoles. And I don't think this would be a bad thing at all if Sony did end up doing this, because it would be a good way for them to kind of cover all the bases. Because the unknown factor here that we need to be aware of is that Microsoft will be doing something. I know that we have a lot of conversation about how not many people are going to be that interested anymore in buying an Xbox, knowing they can get Microsoft's games on other platforms and stuff like that. But the unknown factor is, how is the market going to respond to the idea of being able to upgrade to a next generation console for a relatively cheap price, maybe $250 to $300, something like that, or maybe $300 to $350. Well, I mean, if you hit the $350 point at that point, I don't really know. It's still cheaper, but it's almost the equivalent of what the consoles are being sold for right now. So I don't know if a lot of people will really care about that, depending on what benefits they get. For example, knowing they get a much better CPU, which in turn means that they can expect much better frame rates, that alone would maybe be enough to convince a lot of people who maybe don't care about 4K resolutions or higher resolutions or how good their games look. They just want them to run better. Who knows? Maybe there's a large market of people out there who will go for that. Although I would say that most people who would gravitate towards that just want to spend as little money as possible. That is the, big factor here we need to keep in mind, that Sony does care about power just like Microsoft does for multiple reasons. They need to future-proof this console to an extent because they don't know how long the console generation is going to last. They want to be able to, say, hey, this is how powerful our console is out of the gate, and this is what it's going to be able to do. That's a big factor in getting people excited. So, I don't know. I think that this is definitely a possibility. I'm not going to sit here and say it's likely, it's going to happen. You wait and see. Sony's going to do exactly what Microsoft is doing. That might not be the case, but I could also see Sony not letting Microsoft do this without going toe-to-toe with them. Because this could very well have been the, ace up the sleeve of Microsoft, maybe, with this idea that we can offer a next-generation console at a $300 price point or even a $250 price point. And then if Sony tries to do the same thing, well, they're going to meet them, right there. So it takes away from maybe something that Microsoft had. And we know that Sony can be very competitive like that. There's a very good chance that maybe they've been so quiet because they're waiting, they're trying to hear and gauge what Microsoft's plans are, what they're doing, so that way they can be prepared and, again, cover all their bases. We're going to have to wait to see, though. I did think this would make for an interesting conversation. So at this point, I'm going to ask you guys what you think. Do you think that it's possible that Sony could end up releasing multiple SKUs of the PlayStation 5, just similarly to what Microsoft is planning on doing, or do you think it's unlikely? And if so, what do you think the price points on these consoles would be? I will be very interested to see what you guys have to say. Would you be out there buying the cheaper version of the console if this was the case, or would you just go for the higher end PS5? Or do you think that Sony's just going to stick with what they know, release a single SKU? It's going to kind of be a good in between. Leave your thoughts below. Leave the video a like if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon, and be sure to share the video out on top of all that, as it really helps. But until next time, guys, take care.